Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Pick Trail. We sit down with our very own Kevin McPherson with this week's Hog Hoops Report. Of course, we had the big football weekend, number 2, Alabama visiting the Hill. But we also had some Hog Hoop recruits that came down to visit the Hill as well. It had a busy weekend in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, and it had a busy weekend in Fayetteville. How big was it for the Arkansas recruits, Kevin?
Well, it was huge because Arkansas finally got those two targets. Their teammates. They're both 6'10 plus out of Denver, Colorado.
Yeah.
And we're talking about national top 15 5-star Bay Fall, the 6'11 forward center. And we're talking about 6'10 Asani Diop, a combo forward, really.
Yeah.
But these guys are cousins. They're teammates on the grassroots circuit in the spring and summer with the Colorado Hawks on the Adidas 3SSB. And they're also high school teammates now at accelerated schools for their senior season. And these guys had planned a mid-September official visit that got bumped out to the Alabama game weekend. And, they arrived on Friday between 4 and 5 o'clock. Everything I'm told about this official visit, by the way, is that it went well. Everybody feels like it went very well. We're going to get more details on feedback on this, but that's the initial feedback I've gotten, which is what you want. I mean, these guys took unofficial visits back in February to Arkansas and the big Razorbacks' big home win over Kentucky. And then they met with coaches across the street at the Basketball Performance Center for quite a bit of time before going home. But that was an unofficial visit. So anytime you can get top level recruits back on campus for official visits, especially this late in the recruiting game, and we know the early signing period is just next month now. Now that we're in October, mid-November, that early period. And both of these young men, we're going to talk a little bit about it. They attended Arkansas's basketball practice Saturday morning. They went to the game. They had a photo shoot with Muss and family. We got a lot of pictures out, not only from the photo shoot, but from these guys at the basketball game. But when you look back at the past month in September, visits to the home state school of Colorado, Buffaloes in the Pac-12. They visited Rutgers. And then they also just came off of a Seton Hall official visit. I mean, literally midweek, and then they traveled to Arkansas for the weekend official. Now, as far as I know, that wraps it up for both of those guys in terms of, and this could change in terms of official visits together. I think Bay Fall may take another visit to Auburn. We're going to keep our eyes on that, but that's kind of the plan. He's already visited. They both players. There was a visit back in June during their technically still part of their junior year official set of 5 official visits. Junior year now it would be a senior year official visit. Who knows? He may go for an unofficial, but the idea is he may go back by himself. Though I'm told that things change in recruiting, so we'll keep an eye on it. I still think Arkansas is in the lead for these two guys. CJ, I've been saying it for months. I haven't changed my mind on that. And again, everything went well this weekend. I'm told we're going to get more feedback on it. But look, the other thing is Arkansas had another visitor, an unofficial visitor from class of 2025. Parker Jefferson, another big guy, 6'9 forward center, ranked in the top 45 in the country according to 247 Sports, entering his sophomore season in high school. Both of his parents were Razorback athletes back in the 90s. His mom played basketball for the Razorbacks, and his dad was a football player who lettered, I think it was in 1997. But both parents were Razorbacks. They now live in Texas. Waxahachie, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm going to probably butcher it. But they came up for an unofficial visit. We've got a nice story out about that on Hogville, but he gave me some feedback. He said the coaches did a great job of taking care of him. Said he enjoyed the football game. He said the wrong team won, but it was still a lot of fun. It was wild, the atmosphere with those 75,000 plus fans. And he said his parents really enjoyed getting back. So when you look at the weekend in terms of visitors, now Arkansas's got a lot of prospects. It was busy in Dallas-Fort Worth. When you look at the prestigious Coach Wooten's top 150 camp in Mansfield, Texas, this is a platform for McDonald's All-American evaluators. The folks that decide who makes those teams in the future are down there evaluating some of the top players in the country. And you had Arkansas's 5-star lone commit for the class of 2023, Layden Blocker, newly minted 5-star national top 15 Keonor Boateng out of Little Rock Central took part. Layden Blocker's younger brother, Landron, who goes to Little Rock Christian Academy. Boateng's team won the 5-on-5 competitive action. They won the gold medal at this event. So not only did you have in-state and other Arkansas targets, but you had them performing well at a high level. And so when we look at recruiting, I'd say big weekend on campus and big weekend in Dallas-Fort Worth for an Arkansas program now that not only has tried to build that wall around the state of Arkansas and done a great job in the last few years of pretty much doing that, that wall now is starting to extend and build out sometimes into the state of Texas when you consider Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh being those first two five-star dominoes. Now Arkansas is in on a lot of high-level guys in the state, looking at classes, moving forward. CJ.
You talked about the atmosphere here against Alabama, with the atmosphere in open practice this week. We haven't talked since we went to open practice for the Hogs, and women's basketball team also had open practice. But we were invited to the Hogs, to the men's basketball team, and we were there for actually like an hour and a half. I think it was supposed to be like 30 minutes. And some things I seen was Nick Smith Jr., who was in a big brace, and but things were still going swell. It looked like Eric Musselman was talking a whole bunch. It looked like the players were talking a whole bunch on defense, even if they were not participated in the drill. I seen Nick Smith Jr. with his hands up, talking to other defenders out there, telling them what to do, yelling, screaming. The gym was loud. What's some things that stuck out to you, Kevin, in that Hogs open practice?
Well, we only got 30 minutes to see the actual practice. We were over there for a while because we also had press conference.
Yeah.
Before practice. Usually, CJ, they do that after practice, but we got them before that. And I think you mentioned Nick Smith and the knee brace. That was I think that's sort of a makeshift situation as precautionary. He tweaked his knee a little bit in the final game over in Europe, and didn't finish that game. And my understanding is this is not anything serious moving forward, just a little precautionary. And I suspect he won't be wearing that for very long, even in practices. But we did see that. We didn't see any 5-on-5, but the things that stuck out to me, you mentioned some of it, the attention to detail and the drill work. We saw a lot of shell offense with minimal defensive presence, with some GAs and walk-ons, with boxing mitts on, giving a little bit of contact, not true in-your-face pressure, but you saw Arkansas really work on timing, spacing. Less is more in the dribbling and getting off the ball with pass and guys moving, releasing off screens and, Dylan in two-man game. And so you saw that on offense. On defense, you're right. A lot of loud voices. Musselman implored the team to get louder during drills. He wanted to hear them communicate more and more loudly. Certainly he's the loudest voice in the practice facility, and you expect that from your head coach who's ironing out the details, and they're very detail-oriented. Things are brisk pace. We know that. Get in a drill, get out of a drill. Everybody's involved. They had a carousel defensive drill where guys that couldn't be on the court for the 5-on-5 were rotating in as it was going, so they didn't stop. They just rotated guys in and off the court. So I thought all of that was very impressive. I think the one thing that stands out to me, just looking at when we got 2 open practices in July before they took that trip overseas, and then on Monday of this week, I thought Arkansas looked a little more in sync and a little tighter in all these different drills versus what we saw in those first 2 opportunities back in July. So it tells me that guys, even if it's not at the rate Musselman wants, because he talked mostly about the youth and the challenges of a new team during his press conference, every topic seemed to shift back to that talking point. I think even having said that, just as the untrained eye to be in there for a third practice a few months later, they do look a little bit more in sync and like they're starting to pick up on things. So I think that's encouraging. Some of the biggest takeaways, CJ, when I look at all of it, what we've seen, what we've heard, and what we saw with the tour, because we learned some things when you're playing other competition, no matter what level, no matter what rules, no matter where it is. What we've learned is this team, right to this point, struggles shooting the three. They've had problems with ball control, taking care of the basketball / turnovers. And we don't know yet with the free throw line, because I thought they underperformed there overseas, but a lot of that was way that game was officiated. I don't think that will be the case when they get into their college season. But they beautifully attack the rim, and they make that a focal point on offense. They do a great job, I think. When I look at the transition offense, I think it's going to be the best that Musselman has. And then the other thing, defensively, they got better in Europe in those last 2 games. Tighten the rotation. We know Musselman's going to do that when it matters. And their defensive percentages got so much better and they were more effective. And let's not forget they held 3 of the 4 opponents below 60 points. So, again, it's a different game than college game. We got to talk a little bit about the schedule, because now we can look ahead as Arkansas, now that we know the full schedule, including an exhibition game announcement that's very intriguing, CJ.
Very, very intriguing. A lot of people have been looking out for this schedule as well as myself. And when the schedule came out, what's some of the games that you want to see, or one of the top games that you thought were like, hey, that's one of the games I'm ready to see right there?
Well, there's several of them when you schedule a challenging slate, and that's what Arkansas has done, I think, for the first time really under Musselman when you look at non-conference. And I think the conference schedule, the way it's going to play out, is going to be the toughest. So you combine it along with 6 freshmen as part of those 11 newcomers. And you understand why Musselman keeps shifting the conversation in the last press conference to tamper expectations.
Mm-hmm.
But games that stand out, for me, it starts with the final regular season game, Kentucky on March 4th at Bud Walton Arena. Only CBS national televised game on Arkansas' schedule. Kentucky's going to be the pick to win the SEC, and they're going to be a top 5 team coming into the season. Arkansas will probably be in that top 10. So you've got the marquee matchup at the end, but you've got the road game at Baylor in the Big 12 SEC Challenge in January after they've started league play. Baylor, we know, arguably the top program in the country when you look at the last 2 or 3 years, won a title 2 years ago. And then you look at before that Kentucky game, Arkansas goes on the road for 2 games, Bama and Tennessee before hosting Kentucky. I think that's the toughest 3-game stretch right before you go into SEC play. And if you look back at the previous 2 seasons, Arkansas has been at its best at the end of the season. So you wonder how big those games can be and how good can Arkansas be to maybe come out of there 2-1 or 3-0. That's not going to be easy. And then I look at non-conference, aside from Baylor, you got OU again in Tulsa, massacre last year that didn't go Arkansas's way. Yep. That's going to be a tough matchup. You look at the Maui Invitational, you're back outside the continental United States again. But then before you ever get to any of that, CJ, the first exhibition game that I know of or can remember in my lifetime that Arkansas is not going to play that at home. And they're playing another high major. I don't know of that ever happening when you talk about going to Texas and helping them open up their new arena in Austin next month, October 29th. That's fast approaching. And so when you talk about games in Europe, you've got another game that doesn't count. Don't tell Arkansas fans that it doesn't count because our hogs and horns, it always means more. That SEC slogan, it just means more. For Arkansas, Longhorns need to go ahead and get in the league because that game always means more. But it's exhibition charity game. Arkansas is going to learn more about itself before games that count. And I think that's a good thing. The other thing is we got 2 weeks from today for the red-white intra-squad scrimmage, which will be back in Barnhill Arena for a 3rd year, which, again, 2 weeks from now. I mean, we're in basketball season, CJ. Practices are ramped up. It's full practices now. 2 weeks until fans can go and see them in a game atmosphere, even though it's intra-squad. And then that Texas game, man, that is big time for an exhibition game. Kudos to the staff for adding a little more intrigue and a little more difficulty to an already unprecedented, in my mind, non-conference and conference schedule when you look since Musselman's been there. One thing I left out, 4 of the first 6 SEC games are on the road, including at Auburn, who's going to be a ranked team. So brutal schedule for the Hoop Hogs.
Yeah, one game that pokes out to me is probably the Baylor game and also the Texas game. Is this the first time they played Baylor since 2 years ago, since the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, this will be their first matchup since then. And, fans are, that's going to be a talking point, obviously, before the game. Arkansas really, you could argue, gave Baylor its toughest matchup in that run. Baylor was dominant. Yeah. Not, in my opinion, every year, whoever wins the NCAA tournament is a justified and rightful champion. But some championships teams, to me, are better than others. And I thought that Baylor team was one of the classical all-time title teams. I really do. When you look at different eras and the way the game has changed, I think that's one of the ones that stand out for me. Not only the way they did it, but how dominant they were from start to finish in that tournament. And, again, kudos to Arkansas for kind of being that team that fared a little better than others. Still a loss, and now you go on the road. You played them in a neutral site in the NCAA tournament. Now you're on the road, but we'll see what this Arkansas team made of a lot of talent, CJ. We know that 3 5-stars. Trevon Brazile might be a first-round type prospect. Pro Day's coming up next week, by the way, on October 5th. Need to throw that in there. So I'll get some feedback for some NBA scouts on exactly where they think some of these talented Razorbacks might slot into the next NBA draft 2023 in June. I know Hog fans don't want to hear that, but it's a reality now, the way this program recruits.
That's true. And Razorback fans, do not forget that Baylor game. And look, Kevin, I didn't realize red and white game was 2 weeks away. Basketball season is definitely here. Speaking of basketball season,
it's in our face. CJ.
Let's talk about some former Hogs who are getting ready for the NBA season. NBA preseason kicked off, and I was just talking to one of my friends yesterday on how Golden State, the real starting 5 played in the preseason game in Japan. And not only the starting 5, Moses Moody and a couple more guys getting ready for the preseason. Talk about the former Hogs getting ready for the NBA season coming up, Kevin.
Well, the only starter in Golden State lineup who wasn't in there was Klay Thompson. He's with the team. He was with the team in Japan. He didn't play, but Moses Moody was the first player off the bench in both games for either team. 4 minutes in, he's checking in, so he's the first reserve. We'll see how that plays out, not only through preseason, but when the season actually gets here, when guys like Klay Thompson are back in the mix. But you're right. I mean, you had Steph Curry, you had Wiggins, you have Looney. I mean, you have Jordan Poole, and so you've got Draymond Green. So you had the stars outside of Klay. Of course, like I said, he was there on the bench in street clothes. But Golden State went 2-0 against the Washington Wizards, and Daniel Gafford, who's a reserve coming off the bench, the backup center for the Wizards. Moody last night in game 2 finished with 12 points, 5 of 10 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3, had a couple of assists. But, man, he makes 2 or 3 plays a game where you understand why he's projected down the line as a guy that's going to be not only a solid 3-and-D guy, but I think his floor IQ is so high. He does other things. He's a really good passer. He brings other things to the floor. And when you look at him now, I think when I looked at the 2 games combined, he had 3 or 4 dunks. And so people don't think of Moses Moody as much of a dunker as they do a shooter. But if he gets a shoulder inside of you, he's so broad and so strong, and he's added muscle with that 7-foot plus wingspan on that 6'5.5", 6'6" frame. Here's a guy that gets to the rim pretty quickly and is there before you know it because of all that length and that size to kind of bully his way in there. And so he's adding that part to his game as well. I thought Gafford did some good things. The first game of the 2, he had 8 points, 3 or 4 from the field, a dunk, but he had on a lob pass, but he had a couple of nice moves around the basket. Something that's underappreciated about him, by the way. Always a high percentage level guy, around 70% shooting from the field going into year 4 in the NBA, and a top 10 shot blocker as well. He started a lot since joining Washington after coming over, originally drafted by Chicago. But with Porzingis, who was traded for by the Wizards, he's now the starter 7'3" guy that's been a journeyman in the league, past All-Star. But Gafford's going to have a solid role with Washington, barring injury. And then we've got guys like Isaiah Joe, Jalen Williams, Patrick Beverly. All these players, former Hogs, are going to debut on Monday, tomorrow, in their preseason game. So a lot going on. The first opening night is October 18th. That's ring night for the Warriors. Moses Moody will get his ring, and they'll host the Lakers. Patrick Beverly earlier that night, Isaiah Joe and the Sixers will travel. I think they travel to play the Boston Celtics. So it's doubleheader night. We just talked about red white 2 weeks from today. That's only 2 days after that. So it's basketball season, CJ. I know we're midway through the football season, but if you need some comfort food, if you're a football fan right now in Razorback Nation, let that be your basketball Hogs, because this is one of the most, if not the most, highly anticipated seasons in decades. I really think it is when you look at what Musselman's built, how he's recruited, and this schedule we just talked about. And the Pro Hogs kind of helps put a stamp on the idea that things are going right in the program. I left out Bobby Portis. Bobby Portis and the Bucks last night opened their preseason against Memphis Grizzlies, and Bobby Portis was doing Bobby Portis things. It's great to see the Pro Hogs already out on the court, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see the current Hog team in 22-23. That unfolds, like we said, in the next few weeks.
The best time of the year, Kevin. I'm looking forward to Patrick Beverly playing with a new team this season with the LA Lakers, and Jalen Williams, I expect him to get some more minutes with Chet being out for the season with his injury. Kevin, it's always good to see you each and every week for another Hog Hoops Report, my man.
Good to be with you, CJ. Thank you.
And look, guys, make sure you guys don't go anywhere. We got more Pick Trail coming up after the break.